Hello and welcome to another interview. It kind of concerns the Nonviolent Communication Congress. It concerns the Resilience Congress, and it's something in between. And I'm really happy that you, Connirae, are part today here of this interview. You have developed core transformation work. You have developed the wholeness work. You've been in the field of NLP for many, many years. And my idea is, since I've learned so much from you, and I profit both in the field of resilience and in the field of communication, especially empathic communication, that it would be great to ask you a couple of questions. And thanks for sharing your time with us.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk with you, Sebastian, and also to share some what I think is significant work with everyone else who's on this interview.
Yeah. So me thinking about the content of the interview, I came across a really beautiful quote or definition, however you want to put it, of the term of resilience. And Connirae Andreas, one of the most famous women in the field of resilience in Germany, and I would say Europe, she said that resilience is the little sister of enlightenment.
That's a beautiful quote, Sebastian. I had not heard that, but it resonates with me.
Yeah, and
did you want to say more about it?
Yeah, since the wholeness work in a way resonates with me in terms of towards enlightenment, whatever that means. So yeah, could you say something about this quote concerning your work? And yeah.
Yes. Enlightenment's a big word, so we have to not let it intimidate us, of course. Sometimes I use the word awakening because it feels a little less intimidating, but yet on track to what we're talking about. So yes, the wholeness work is really in this domain. As you know, the wholeness work, it started out, if I could just share a little bit about that. Yes. It started out, as you mentioned, I've been an NLP trainer, writer, developer for decades. We got involved in the field very early on, and it was 1977, many years ago. And but I got to the place in my personally and professionally, I was going through this life crisis that was on all levels. And I had this strong sense everything was falling apart. I actually was concerned I might be dying given what was happening to me on the physical level. I didn't know how else to explain it. But I had the thought, somehow, if I have a chance of surviving, I must give up everything I think I know, everything, and be open to some kind of transformation or change that's somehow deeper and more than anything I've done so far. So that I felt my survival was on the line. So I was motivated to really do that. And so letting go of the things that I knew that generally worked, and then opening myself. What else is there? And in that search, you use the word enlightenment, and I began to search in spiritual circles. And my question was, what might people know that I don't know that could perhaps enrich all of our lives? So I started reading accounts of spiritual transformation. And yes, they used words like awakening, like enlightenment. Mostly they didn't have a good way to account for it. People would just say it happens by grace. It just suddenly occurred. I have no idea how I got there, but suddenly I had this remarkable, very foundational shift in my experience of myself and reality. And the kind of shift the spiritual teachers were talking about sounded like the kind of shift I knew I needed to make. Yeah. It's like a really fundamental shift. Yeah. where what seemed the common thread is it's not just a word like enlightenment or awakening. It's this fundamental shift of the way we are and the way we experience life so that we can go through life with more ease. And that's resilience, right? We can go. So these spiritual teachers are basically talking about a life of more resilience. It's not just some abstract thing. It's very practical when it happens. Mm-hmm. So it was a radical shift people were talking about, where suddenly it's as if most life suffering would sort of fall away. Mm-hmm. And they didn't seem to be meaning that suddenly there would be the food on the table if somebody didn't have food. You know, it didn't necessarily fix problems on the physical level directly, but what was fixed is the suffering that we tend to add to the problems that already exist in life. And we're all good at that. We're all good at sort of adding on extra. So I got very curious about that. How could that happen? Is it possible that there would be a reliable way to this, even though the spiritual teachers say it just happens? Maybe you meditate, but they didn't seem to have a reliable path. So it's out of holding this question: can we have a reliable path to this level of resilience, this really deep resilience? You know, and the answer started coming, yes, I think there is a reliable path. And this is where I thank my background in NLP, because NLP is all about, well, what's useful about NLP is its precise way of mapping out experience. But had I stayed in the NLP I knew, I wouldn't have gotten there. What I had to do was kind of give it all up and start fresh, assuming I know nothing, because that was really true. You know, we discover more and more how that's true. and then starting to explore what might be a precise, specific, experience-based way of getting to this place, this life of ease that the spiritual masters were speaking of. So that's what the wholeness work is. Yeah. And that's how it really does relate to awakening. So I love your quote.
Yeah, and I found it so brilliant, because it draws the connection from resilience to awakening, and it matches, since I've been a wholeness work practitioner for 3 or 4 years now, it really matches my experience within my resilience, becoming more fluid, becoming more, I would say, transparent towards challenges and towards irritations, while not losing my human given emotions. It's not all the emotions are away, but it's not so much blocks anymore, in a way.
Yes. I've experienced that same thing in myself, because of course, as I was exploring, is there a way to this that's precise and specific? Can we do this? Of course, I was my practice person. I was actually not in any kind of shape to do teaching at that time. I was sort of a hibernation period. And so I really needed to apply it to myself and sort of heal and transform myself before I went beyond that. And I started experiencing also what you're speaking of, with the wholeness work, it doesn't tend to be this single moment, dramatic life. Everything is different. Before I wasn't enlightenment and now I am kind of thing. Yeah. It's much more a gradual process, but it's reliable and you can count on it. That's the same thing. Yeah. It's reliable and you can count on it. It's also simple. It's also really simple.
Yeah, and what I really like are those subtle shifts, where you do not have those where often said breakthrough moment. You go bam, and there you are. It's those little shifts, one step and one baby step at a time. And I've found this or find this so much more easy on my system, because all those breakthrough shifts where you use a lot of force, and you are talking about stages of transformation, where we will put a link below the video. At one stage of transformation, it's from force to no force. And this the wholeness work really helps me to make small shifts in a gradual way, as you said.
Yeah. To continue with that line of thinking, when people have sudden enlightenments, really strong breakthroughs, oftentimes it is difficult for them to adapt, to integrate it. It often is quite disruptive. Yeah. And people don't know what to make out of it. Ramana Maharshi, who was an inspiration for a key piece of this method, and he himself experienced a dramatic breakthrough that took him, I believe it was 12 years to integrate, So, it worked how it worked for him, I'm sure, it's all good. And yet, I'm kind of grateful to have something that works a little more gradually and a little more gently. Yeah. It works. The way the wholeness work happens, the reason it's gentle and gradual is that there's no force to the system, as you were speaking. And that's one of the key elements of wholeness work, no force, that it's all an invitation. And yet, if we know how to find what needs to be discovered in our psyche, if we have a systematic, simple way to find it, and we know how to invite it in a kind way to do what in wholeness work we call integrating with the whole, then we do experience this. Increasingly, we fall in love with ourselves and every other aspect of consciousness. It's like there's nothing that we don't need to fall in love, that we can't easily fall in love with as we start going farther and farther with the work, including those aspects of ourselves that we might have felt ashamed of or felt like, oh gosh, can I even admit that to myself? All of these become not something where we have to try to make anything different, but the natural thing becomes we recognize how it's so easy, how our basic nature is already in love with all of this. So.
I would like to ask you to make a connection from resilience definition, another resilience definition, to the wholeness work. So one of the most famous professors in Germany says that resilience is that what keeps your mental health up during and after crises. And crises, he puts it more like high stress exposure. So whatever keeps your mental or your psychological health intact, that is something, what is resilience. And in a way, it's not putting it away. It's not a way getting absorbed, but it's in a way, Stephen Gilligan calls it, be with it without becoming it. And
yes, it is. Yes, I think, yes, I agree with all of that. And I think what wholeness work does is give us an easy how-to. Mm-hmm. That's what has generally been missing, is like, we have all these nice ideas about how, yes, we can be with it without becoming it, or we can, and we can sit and intend to do that and get there to some degree. Mm-hmm. But with the wholeness work, we have a simple way of actually meeting all of our experience that makes it be possible, possibly to go even one step farther than that, be with it without becoming it. Yeah. Because what happens through the wholeness work is that in addition to this lovely description of stress and resilience, yes, it's being able to be with our, to go through crises with good mental health. And it's also beginning to recognize that each crisis that comes to us, in a way, it's a gift. Mm-hmm. Because if we experience it as a crisis in any way, rather than just, oh, another thing happening, another thing happening. You know, anytime we experience something as a crisis, that flags for us, there's a gift there. This means in some way there's a contraction in our psyche that judges this or identifies it as something that should not be happening, or something else. And that's how the stress response gets created. Mm-hmm. So when something happens that we experience as a crisis, it's an invitation for us to find those, we could call them contracted places in our consciousness, in our psyche, where we tighten up in reaction to or around these events. We can find it easily. Now, we all know already, okay, when we get stressed out, we can find the muscle tension, but Wholeness Work gives us a way to find what's prior to our subjective experience of stress, to the previously unconscious sort of hidden contractions in the psyche that happen because of our belief systems, because of judgments from the past, whatever. We can find these, meet them, and allow them to release themselves after oftentimes decades that they've just been hanging out there. You know, these happen as a result of our upbringing. They happen, may possibly, I won't go into why they happen is less important than knowing how to meet them and then inviting them to relax and dissolve. Yes. So give them the how-to. That's the key thing.
Yeah. For me, it's since I've spent a lot of time with that, it's absolutely natural so far. My question would be, so if somebody hears this, and I imagine I would be hearing it the first time, it would sound rather abstract, because usually, and I know the first time I heard you talking about this, it was here in Göttingen, and I was so irritated. I was like, what's she talking about? And I tried to put it in the patterns I know. And you said, and I know I've asked a lot of questions, and you always appreciated every question, said like, isn't that interesting? And then said like, well, let's lead by experience. So would you be open to just for the field of awareness, just whoever watches this, just really briefly give them an idea of what you call the field of awareness, and how to maybe just by accessing that, making a difference to your physical well-being?
Oh, I'd love to do that, Sebastian. Yeah. And I think I want to mention the book on the wholeness work too, which will go into this much more than I am able to in our short interview. But what we can do here is I can give a live, so to speak, a glimpse of what I am speaking of, just a beginning glimpse. So the easiest way to do this perhaps is for me to guide myself through something. And I'll take the very beginning, the basic process, the basic practice. Wholeness work includes way much more than this, but this is the core of it. So here we go. Since our topic is resilience, how about if I pick something, if we think about what could make waves in my feeling of resilience or flow in life? Okay, most of us encounter things. Let's say I feel stressed out by, somebody hurt my feelings or something, or I got angry or irritated with something, So if I start with that, I just put myself into this experience. Okay, somebody hurt my feelings. Okay, I'm just going to go with that, and I could go, and if you're watching and you want to follow along, you can do that too. It's fine. You can pick a hurt or an irritation or anything else really, and just see how far you get. It may not be that it's enough, but it might be enough to get a taste. So for me, the feeling of hurt, I can feel something in my abdomen, and it feels a little bit raw and a little bit weighty. So I kind of notice where it is located. I feel into it, notice how much space it takes, and I notice the sensation quality. So it feels a little raw, a little bit weighty. It's not very strong right now, but it's definitely, I can find it. Then I go to the next step. And this is, okay, I am aware of this. I just explained it to you where it is and how it feels like. So it's true. If I think the thought, I am aware of this, that's a true thought. I am aware of this in this moment. So now we get to an interesting question. Yeah, and if you're following along, you can do it too. I am aware of this. And it's just notice that's true. I am aware of this. Now comes the interesting question. You see, in Eastern spirituality, there's this whole idea that enlightenment and awakening happens when we dissolve the ego or somehow deal with the ego. It's just less precise about how do we do that? What is even an ego? How do we find one? You know, how would we know it if we saw it in a grocery store? You know, what is one of these things? So the thing is what I started playing with is realizing, well, the ego, a simple way to understand this is it's the I. So what if now we go, so if we take this statement, okay, I am aware of this feeling here in my gut. Now, where is the I located? And if I just ask myself that question, I don't think it out mentally, I don't figure it out, but I can find a practical answer to that question. What is the ego and how do we find it? It's like, it's the I. So, but I is just still an abstract concept until we find it located in space somewhere specifically, and then we get even more detailed about it. So here we go. I'm going, I am aware of this in my gut. Oh, right now it's a little bit churny. I feel it's a little churny. And so where is the I that's aware of this? Okay. I go with the first thing that comes into my mind. And what I get is something right out here in front of me a little bit. It's a little bit on the left, my left side. And it's about this big right here. And for me, in this moment, it's fairly it's almost like it's a sense of space. It's not like I'm seeing a big cantaloupe or something, you know, something very substantial. It's more like it's this sense of space. It's almost like it's a little emptier than everything around it. And it can come up differently. It does come up differently for every single person. And it comes up differently for each of us at each time we ask. So right now, this is how it comes. The last time I was offering a demonstration, I think it was smoky inside. There is a sense of smoky inside. Sometimes it can be like foggy or cloudy. Sometimes it can be quite dense. Other times really open and airy. Sometimes there might be a sense of warmth or a sense of coolness. It could come up in any way. It can come up outside the body. It can come up inside the body. It can come up way far away outside the body. It can come up close. So we can find the I anywhere, and anywhere that, if you're following along, anywhere that you find it, you just go with it. and it will work. To just take whatever seems to be coming up for you. So for me, I get this sense of space right here, and I sense in and through, and I discover, there's this sense of, it actually feels kind of still and sort of emptiness, maybe a little too empty even, a little bit almost like a vacuum or something. Anyway, it's emptiness. So now we go a little farther. If we put this on pause, now we go a little farther and we go back to that sentence. I am aware of this sensation. So I've already found the sensation. It was in my gut. I found the I, it's over here. I know its sensation quality. And now, what about that middle word, the connector word, awareness? I am aware of this sensation. If we explore a little bit, what is awareness? And in the book and in the trainings, I guide people much more in this so that we can have an increasingly rich experience. But to give a quick sense of it, it's like, the awareness, that word is used a lot in spiritual circles and otherwise. And often I discovered that if we just ask people what they're experiencing, it's quite different, one person from another. So I realized if for this method to work, it's important to have a particular understanding and an access of what awareness is and can be easily if we check in. It's not a mental concept. It's like if you know, okay, what is it like to touch my skin? Well, we can do that. Well, we can have the same kind of just practical experience of awareness. And I'm using it to mean the capacity to experience. The capacity to experience. It's sort of this field of space that's all around all the time. So I can check in this moment and know that I'm aware if a sound comes into the right or the left, I'm aware of it. If there's a sound to the right, I'm aware of it. If it's any direction, there's this easy sensing, noticing of the sound. So if something touches me on my knee, I notice there's an easy recognition. So this capacity to experience, this capacity to notice, it's pre-existing, it's already here. I don't have to send my awareness into my knee so that I can notice it. So, oh, I think something might be touching my knee. I'm going to send my awareness there now. It's more like something bumps me on my knee. I right away register it. And if somebody calls me my name, I'm likely, it just automatically comes in. So we can, in this moment, just pause and have this sense of space through the body and all around in every direction where there is this capacity to experience. Yeah, and I know I'm going kind of quickly, but you can find out, everyone listening, you can just sense, can I experience this? What she's talking about? Because mentally understanding it won't matter. It won't help at all, except for as a way station to actually taking a moment to pause and having the experience itself. So yeah, so I can do this. I can pause. I can notice the capacity to experience that's throughout my full body. And as I notice that, and there's this capacity experience, I notice myself uncrossing my legs just naturally. They want to be more uncrossed now. And I notice myself breathing a little more deeply. And I notice also this experience of space, of the space that's all around in every direction. And there's really no edge or border to it. This experience of space has no edge or border. I might know mentally that if a sound happened on the other side of the world right now, I wouldn't hear it, but that's a concept. In terms of my actual subjective experience, I can't find a line or border anywhere where I would know, oh, if the sound is on the other side of that border, that line, I wouldn't hear it. So the experience of awareness is this experience of space without edge, this experience of, we could say, presence or capacity to notice that's unbounded. So with that in mind, then we can return. So I can now, I'm your demo subject here. And so I can now return to my experience. Okay, there's this I that I found over here. And if you're following along at all, you may have found one too. And the thing about this I is that it's a false I, if we think about it a little bit. And I will take a moment to share some understandings about this. Because if we think about it intellectually, we know, I'm not this place in space. That doesn't make any sense at all. You know, if somebody says, Connirae, who are you? I'm not going to go, well, I'm this place, a little place in space out here right in front of me. That's who I am. I can tell you, you know. And yet, the interesting thing is that as I started exploring this work with people, I found that when people would say, I am aware of this, or I am this, or I am that. And each time when we find where's the I located, there's always a location in space, and it's always smaller than the full field of consciousness. So that lets us know that our unconscious, like if I go, I am trying to solve this problem, but the I that's trying to solve it is kind of small, we already know then that we are attempting to solve something from a limited place. So it's not my full consciousness. It's not my full being that's trying to solve this. It's some limited place. And that turns out to be how we are living our lives. And it's as far as I can tell, this is universal. We relate to each other through these small eyes. We attempt to solve problems through these small eyes. We attempt to deal with stress through these small eyes. So if we take this one, and I want to add too, I don't know what's really true in a philosophical sense about who am I really? I'm not trying to answer that question, but I do know that whoever it is, whatever is the true answer, it's going to include more than this small place and space. And it wouldn't include any less. Surely it would include this full field of consciousness that I can easily access, this full field of awareness. Surely all of that is part of at least who I am. So now, if that, and whether or not that makes any sense, what we can do is go back to the experiment and go a little farther. So if I go, okay, here's this I that I found, it's right here in front of me. And now we do a little exploration. I can go and I can sensing in and through the sensation quality here, in and through the area. Now I can just ask myself, invite the system to notice what happens when the sensation of this I, whatever's here, without me having to understand it mentally, notice what happens when the sensation of this I is invited to open and relax, dissolve, melt, in and as the fullness of awareness that is all around and throughout. Yeah, and if I just take a moment to let that happen myself, okay, what happens when the sensation of this, yeah, it's already starting, it's been starting. I can feel, for me in this moment, it feels as if there's this interesting kind of rippling thing that's happening. I've never had it happen quite this way before. It's interesting. It's kind of like waves and rippling that get a little more and a little more and a little more. And oh, interestingly enough, it's as if they get a little more and a little more. They're happier as they come. Yeah, this is truly the different than it's quite a little different than it's ever happened for me before. But I can sense it. Yeah, it's like there's a little more joy as they're going to meet the wholeness that is everywhere and dissolving into the whole thing. And it's happening kind of slowly, this rippling of what was already kind of invisible. And yet it invisibly spreads. And then it's as if it's kind of, I can feel where I almost have to blink my eyes that you probably, to bow to it, to go with what's happening. And in that, it's as if something is shifting that is more categorical. It's as if, okay, something just completed itself. And now I'm waking up again as a little bit different person and I feel this more presence through my body. I feel myself more present through my body and through the space of around that's all around. A little more stillness, more subtleness, and so on. So that's to give you a quick glimpse. And there are more steps. We can go farther. And but that, yeah, did you want to say something, Sebastian?
Yeah, the first time I got in contact with this was by reading the manual. And I remember it, I sat in my kitchen, on my kitchen table, or at my kitchen table, and I read it. And I felt by reading it, the integration happening and the relaxation. And my cognitive mind was really skeptic. And I thought like, okay, what's working there? Is it submodality work? No, it can't be. Is this bifocal awareness? Well, maybe, I don't know. And so I was checking all the concepts I had, and I did not get an answer. And then I read the full field of awareness, and I said like, okay, is this the subconscious? No, doesn't feel like. So I just want to frame this experience for everybody who has some type of experience with personal growth work, and maybe even with core transformation. And for me, it actually was different. I had a really good access to it because of all my meditation work. And from what I have achieved in meditation, being without any thought, which took me years and years, and it lasted only a couple of seconds. With wholeness work, whereas the one who's thinking, integrate him or integrate this I, and again, my mind became clear, and I was like, oh my God. And I was absolutely amazed. So I think if you are irritated now while watching this, it's great, because irritations are moments of new learning. And what the beauty of this method is, what took, let's say, a couple of minutes now, for me, after a couple of months practicing with it, and the practice with it is really natural. It's really, as you said, it gives strength, it gives relaxation, it gives a more easy access to the force and the strength you have inside yourself. Right now, once I notice one of those contractions, and I still, every day, I felt something here, and it just, by giving it awareness, it just dissolves and melts, and it really is some kind of installed resilience mechanism, so to speak, having practice with the wholeness work. So I just wanted to share my perspective, because I know how deeply irritated I was whenever I heard. I was like, okay, what's she talking about? I know she's great, but this is really, really strange. And then you say, like, yeah, and we are not asking for submodalities. We are asking for sensation qualities. And I was like, okay, now this is different to NLP and to what I know. So I just wanted to share my perspective on that.
Yes, I really appreciate that, Sebastian. Yeah, that's fun for me to hear too. Yeah, and boy, you packed a lot into that short statement. You did. I want to underscore a couple of things you said there. One is that it's very easy for us to take something new that comes to us and try to put it into an old category that we already have. And I think that the reason that wholeness work came to me was because I was desperate enough in my life at that time that I didn't do that. And if we do that with the wholeness work, what tends to happen is we dumb it down. We make it a little bit less than it really is meant to be and can be quite easily. So sometimes we have to include, though, where's the one who wants to put it in the old categories, or where's the one who, and with the wholeness work, there are ways that we can include all this too. So because it's never that we need to or want to be fighting with ourselves. At this level work, we are truly including everything. So you mentioned it goes beyond NLP a little, and I want to share too my perspective on that, because many of the people that come to our trainings and wholeness work have strong NLP background, practitioner, master practitioner, trainer, and so on. And many of them also, recently, I've been meeting with a wholeness consultation group that is for people who've been through the level 3 and or level 4 training and wholeness work already. So because it's a whole system, there's quite a bit to learn to really, really get maximum benefit. Although I'm going to say also, you start getting the benefits right away, and then it just increases. Anyway, so in this group, what I was noticing was quite a few people were sharing something along those lines, what you just stated, Sebastian, that like, wow, I'm coming back to this, and I keep deepening my wholeness work training because I'm finding it goes to a different level than anything I've done before. That's the only way I can put it. You know, I have more of this life of flow now, and, you know, and I want more of that. I see that the more I do, the more it happens for me, and that it's somehow on a deeper level. And I want to also say that at the same time, I consider it to be an expression of NLP. And I think it just, and I come to this understanding of stages of consciousness and stages of transformation that, I will be doing a video on that, and we'll make that available. Also, it's a useful way of understanding all of this, because the wholeness work is effective because it has the precision of NLP. And yet it's also effective because it engages with the kind of a slightly different set of presuppositions about experience and life. So that sort of go to that next stage of development, the next stage of transformation, so that we can sort of uncover our what the spiritual teachers call our true nature. And we can call it whatever we want, but it's wonderful what we actually can discover, and how we don't have to anchor ourselves into states. We don't have to force anything to get we don't have to fix ourselves or make ourselves into a better version of ourselves. Those can be useful at a certain stage of transformation. And then at some level, it becomes about what we could call this experience of beingness, or undivided self, the undivided self, and the capacity to include everything with no force, with zero force and coercion, not even the subtle force. So that when we encounter resistance, it's never resistance. It's always, something beautiful that has shown up is revealing itself, that we now find out how does it want to be included. But when we're doing it in this non-content way, so it's not, we're asking it and it gets the content answer and then we do that, you know, it's much deeper than that.
Yeah. I would like to make a quick detour to trauma, and then go a totally different direction into communication, since it's a context of nonviolent communication online congress as well. But since resilience and trauma in a way are often put together, and looking for post-traumatic growth, or once you have a high exposure to stress, there's a probability to trauma. You have said some things about core transformation and wholeness work in regards to trauma. So I would, since
yes.
you know this training is out there as well, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm glad you raised that point, because with trauma, theoretically, wholeness work can heal that at a deeper level than anything else in a way. Practically, it is not usually a good idea to start with wholeness work with true trauma. And I want to say a little bit about what I mean by true trauma, because these days people use that word so widely. It includes everything and every kind of stress. It's like, oh, that was traumatic for me. When I mean trauma, I mean the kind of thing, you know, serious physical, sexual abuse, violence, and that's what I mean by trauma. I don't mean my husband is judging me a lot. He does it all the time. He yells at me, or my wife belittles me, and it's so traumatic for me. I'm not speaking of that as trauma. That we can start right in on with wholeness work. But with what I would consider, you know, the true trauma, that's more like where people sometimes have a dissociated response to try to deal with it, to try to cope. There, it works much better to start with core transformation, and or something like the NLP trauma cure. Something like that is going to be more effective to start, because that will help with the core transformation can gently and kindly work with the trauma response. Mm-hmm. And especially if you know the advanced core transformation methods, where you know how to use a little dissociation along with it and so on. Mm-hmm. So once we've worked with the trauma response so that there's not this knee-jerk reaction, then there's still a lot more healing that needs to be done for us to be where we want to be, with this life of resilience, this life of joy, this life of well-being. And that's then the wholeness work comes in very well.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's trauma. Then shall we go on to, do you want to say any more about that, or shall we go on to the communication piece?
Please communication. And I just want to give you the why to talk about communication, because from my experience as being a resilience trainer, the most stress, I would say, probably almost in life is based on communication. Either communication within myself, how I talk to myself, whoever is talking to whom, and within companies, the communication to other people. So communication is, in my opinion, one of the major sources of stress, or some kind of a meta stressor even.
Yes, I agree. Yes, and this is where NVC, the nonviolent communication, comes in. It can be so helpful to have ways of communicating, to have this kind of communication skill. And I personally really like and respect and value NVC. I teach it to my clients. I have found it powerful and useful in my own life. Now, that said, and very important, very useful. It was useful between my husband and I. Sometimes we NLP trainers, we like to think, oh, we always knew that stuff, but I have to confess I didn't, I thought I did, but I didn't. Now, then there's another piece to it, though, that's important to add, and that NVC becomes 100 times, maybe 1,000 times easier to teach and to use when one uses it alongside the wholeness work. That's been my experience. And here's why. Those of you who are NVC coaches and trainers, perhaps you have experience like this. My own experience is when I tried personally to use NVC in my own relationships, I would find my emotional reactivity would get in the way. It's like, okay, I know that they're saying this is the right thing to do and to have this non-blaming language, but I feel like blaming, and I would have these emotional responses and get plugged in. So what I noticed was that then if I would work with it in myself using the wholeness work, I would, this emotional hot button, I would be at a place of neutrality, we could say, or kindness. The wholeness work with judgment, by the way, there we go to the wholeness work. To deal with that effectively, we need the day 2 wholeness work methods. It's not just going to be about dissolving the ego. It's about also integrating other contractions of consciousness, including things like the authority structure that we have within. And we have a very simple, practical, systematic way to do that. So once I found that once I was meeting this and integrating this in myself, then I could do it. I could actually express myself more clearly. I knew more what I really wanted to say. It was easier. It was simpler, shorter, to the point, and also kinder. So I found that the other person listened to me better, because even if we have the right words and we use all the right language, if there's that inner place of judgment going off, it doesn't land well. And so, whereas if I have already transformed my judgments, and then I also add the skill of NVC so that I'm communicating in a way that's likely to be received, it lands well. So that's what I found in myself. And I found the same thing with my clients. I would explain that to my clients. I'm thinking of a couple that came in, and with a number of couples, I have done this. business relationships, it's the same thing really. But with these couples, they would each have their hot buttons. And I would explain to them, you know, if each of you, we can do this NVC thing, it's going to be great. But as the moment you feel yourself emotionally volatile, pause, let's do the wholeness work, then come back and finish your sentence and make your request of your partner. And we would do that and find it just flows a lot better between the people that way.
Yeah.
So, oh, one other piece I want to add. This was, I did not expect this. So when I would do wholeness work on things in my relationship with my husband was, you know, that's my most important relationship in my life. He was my work partner, my life partner, my partner in my family. And so I did, so it's worth a lot of time and energy, in my opinion, and I also felt like, okay, this partnership is in a way a spiritual path for me, because it brings up for me the things that I need to notice in myself. Mm-hmm. So as I would notice, okay, I'm getting plugged in about this. I'm really irritated. I'm really annoyed with him about this. And I'm going to go and do the wholeness work so I can clean it up and be really clear on what I'm going to say. And then I'm going to let him have it, you know? and then what I would find, and then as I would do the wholeness work, okay, we can recognize that wasn't necessarily coming from a clean, unattached place. But as I would do the wholeness work, I would discover that some of the time, I actually discovered there was nothing I particularly needed to say. It was just, I would find a sense of humor about the whole thing. And I would kind of go, oh, isn't it sort of funny, the two of us, you know? And I would just be really feeling in my heart this kindness and love about the funny little drama the two of us had just been involved in. And, you know, I would laugh about it, or I would tease him a little bit rather than make any pointed remarks. And, but other times it did help me to get clear on, sometimes there is still a message, and I would be clear and I could say it and it would land better, because it didn't come anymore from a placement of judgment or one up or one down, you know. Yeah. So that's how I see them working together really well.
Yeah. And I remember, and I always love this exercise at the end of day 2, where you have the people have them listen as awareness. And if you want to keep up a high energy or high level of anger or disgust or whatever kind of emotion you are trying to access to, if the other person listens as awareness, it's almost not possible to keep it up. And it's, in a way, it's so non-reactive, and it's such a beautiful experience to be in touch with the other person without having a resonance to your anger or disgust. This absolutely amazed me the first time we did it, and I was like, okay, well, this is really powerful. And still, I still have my buttons. I think emotions make us human, and I like my anger. He's a guardian of my values, and he draws the flaming swords, and he is no longer hurting anyone. He's just, you know, being really clear on, hey, this is really important here for me. And then, you know, it's fine again. And it's more a functional access to my emotions than a dysfunctional access. And this is the way I distinguish that. And wholeness work has really helped me to get a functional access to my emotions, where the pure energy of the emotion can come through, can show itself, and then just, you know, it's okay without harming anyone else or harming myself.
Mhm. I find that same kind of thing, Sebastian, and perhaps I'll add a little more if it's okay. I don't know
Yes,
if we've
please.
gone on long enough. You know, these things all become more rich and full through the trainings. I want to say again, because it's simple. The more you learn of it, the simpler it becomes. And at the same time, it's really easy to miss a lot of the subtleties that are important to maximize the effect and the benefit. So this listening experience Sebastian just speaking of, there's a lot, there's still more to it. There's quite a bit more to get the full potency. And at day 2, we're at a place in the training where there's enough background, we can get that, we can start getting that potency. So, and then the farther we go, the more we can get potency in these different areas of our life. And since you brought up emotions, I would like to say a little more about this too. Like this anger and the hurt. I see, this is how I'm thinking about it right now. Who knows, maybe tomorrow it's different or next year it's different. Because I do experience that as I do the wholeness work with myself, inside myself, it keeps updating my understanding of things. And as I learn what I need to do to fully meet and integrate myself and continue my own progression, my own evolution. Anyway, I think of hurt and anger as sort of siblings in the emotional repertoire. They're siblings, and oftentimes different ones of us are stronger with one of these emotions than the other. So for me in my growing up years, I learned anger was not okay in my family of origin, at least not for us kids, off limits for us. and so I learned, and I sort of got the message through my church background and so on, that if I was angry, that meant something, I was less of a person, I was not as good. So that was, so I suppressed it, or I hid it away and didn't notice it myself very much anymore. And whereas hurt, that was an acceptable emotion, a little more so anyway. Best just to not have any, but was, I think, to tell you the truth. So with wholeness work, for me, it gave me a way of unlayering my protections, of pretending like I didn't have these emotions. Even starting, the hurt is what showed itself to me more quickly. And then the healing of this and the transforming of this. And then I started to notice the anger too. And we sometimes need to include the protective layers that keep these hidden. And I'm going over this quickly, but with wholeness work, we're guided in very specific ways to find these all, to easily discover them in experience, not in mental concepts, so we can begin integrating it all. So for me, that the anger was the more the later piece to start noticing and have its place. And for some other people, like the anger is stronger and the hurt side is the harder thing to notice. My sense is that most of the time they are these siblings that work together inside, that they're often, when we, like as children, if our feelings are hurt, then the anger is a protective quality. It wants to kind of stand up for the one who was hurt and, get things right again. And so then, let's see, excuse me, where am I going with this? for a moment. I think what's important is that these are they're siblings, but they're also in a way polarities to each other. So fully resolving the hurt, this is the piece I wanted to get to. Fully resolving the hurt means reclaiming also the angry part. And acknowledging, including it as its own right, as its own valuable, beautiful expression. And then for the anger to fully resolve itself, it needs to also have the hurt side included, the piece that it's trying to protect. And then once both of these are fully included, then we begin to have the most flexibility and ability to be present in the most fluid, least attached sort of way. So that's a little more esoteric perhaps than I meant to get into on this first interview, but since you meant, but I think it's perhaps of interest. And those of us that, like, if I'm dealing with hurt and it keeps coming up over and over again, there's likely to be this flip side of anger not being included. And likewise, when there's an anger coming up over and over again, and it feels out of, strong, out, like, likely it wants to fully protect the hurt one. But to really do that really takes this meeting between the hurt one and the field of awareness, letting it also have its sort of day in court, so to speak, or day to be heard, like that listening experience you were speaking of, Sebastian. Yeah. Let it be listened to by the field of awareness without any attempt to change it. And through that, it changes on its own choice. Yeah. So
yeah. Well, it's I'm feeling really blessed. I have so many new ideas and so many new impulses, and yeah, I think it's a good point to stop right here. So yes, yeah. We've covered quite a lot. It spent over an hour, and I really
We've covered a huge amount of ground. Yeah.
Yeah, and what have you talked about? Well, awakening, enlightenment, resilience, trauma, communication, and emotions. 1 hour. Yeah, well.
Yeah. Oh, well, in 1 hour, we handle all of that. Yeah.
So what I would like to mention is that you will be giving a training, and we'll be putting a link below the video as well. And it will be translated to German. It will be the summer, and it will cover the days 1 to 6. So we have days 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Which I've already attended, and I find all of them very, very interesting, and new things happening on every day. And the book in the publishing company from the Jungfermann Verlag is out as well. So yeah.
Yes. I thank you for mentioning those two things. And I want to underscore the book that Jungfermann has published is the title, Coming to Wholeness, How to Awaken and Live with Ease. Yeah. And that is a really good beginning. It guides you really kindly and gently into the world of wholeness work. And so I think it's a great starting place. I would recommend that. And then this training Sebastian is mentioning, we go through levels 1 through levels 3 of the training. You can choose how far you want to go too. Yeah. You can sign up for level 1, and you get, in level 1, you already get, okay, the dissolving of the ego, but you also get this finding and dissolving the authority structure we spoke of. And you also learn what we call the what's missing piece. Yeah. So how to find places in the consciousness where there's emptiness and yearning for something, and working with that. That's all level 1. Then level 2, we go still farther, and I'm not going to say what's all covered. This is all on the website. And but I just want you to know you can go as far as you want if you do level 1, and then you can sign up for it all at once if you feel like it resonates. But if you're not sure, start with level 1 and then see, do you start to feel benefits already from this? And if so, you can decide if you want to go farther. Yeah. People do start getting benefits right away, for the most part.
And I do this with my clients in coaching, and I teach them the meditation technique or the better sleep technique. So when they wake up at night, they go back to sleep a lot easier and a lot faster. So those are benefits, and they are so easy. They just take 5-10 minutes to explain, and then we practice once or twice, and it makes such a difference for the people who wake up at night and can't get back to sleep. So yeah, this is
sleep is one of the most consistent benefits from the wholeness work. People describe, I've had lifelong sleep issues, and this is the first time something has worked for me. I've had a lot of people tell me that, and So so sleep, relationships, stress, it's useful for quite a few things because of this different level we're working at.
So thanks a lot, Connirae.
Thank you so much, Sebastian.
I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon, and all the best to you from Germany to Boulder, Colorado.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.